Well, last night was another big primary night, and the results, well, Republicans nominating candidates who may hurt them this November, and a frightening lesson for anybody with the temerity in the Republican Party to cross the president. You do so at your own peril. Let's bring in senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman, who breaks it down further.
And the guy who was the best example yesterday of the risks of crossing Donald Trump if you're a Republican, Rich, is a guy we featured on the show before, but for other reasons. You might remember Mark Sanford of South Carolina. He was the state's governor when he disappeared and claimed to be hiking the Appalachian Trail when he was really in Argentina spending quality time with his mistress. Now, after he left office as governor, he won election as congressman, then had the audacity to criticize President Trump. Well, Sanford faced a primary in his re-election bid yesterday, and while flying back from Singapore, Trump tweeted an endorsement of Sanford's opponent, calling Sanford unhelpful, nothing but trouble, and saying he's better off in Argentina. Kudos for being funny there. Sanford lost the first election in his life that he has failed to win. Now, some elected Republicans have been critical of the president. Arizona's Jeff Flake, Tennessee's Bob Corker, Arizona's John McCain among them. But they've all announced their retirements, as have other Trump critics. And this may explain why so few other Republicans have been willing to take on Trump to try and stay in office. Sanford lost his primary. Trump critic Robert Pittenger of North Carolina criticized Trump, lost his primary. Martha Roby of Alabama took back her endorsement of Trump after the Access Hollywood tape. That was 2 years ago. She's now been voted into a runoff in her reelection. So the lesson for Republicans is clear. Confront Trump and you may be out of office before he is, which may explain the comparison that one of those anti-Trump Republicans made about the GOP's relationship to the president today.
We're in a strange place. I mean, it's almost, it's becoming a cultish thing, isn't it? It's not a good place for any party to end up with a cult-like situation as it relates to a president that happens to be purportedly of the same party.
And it's funny, we talk a lot about when are Republicans going to stand up to Trump. Mark Sanford is the abject lesson in the danger in doing so. Do so, and you might find yourself on the wrong side of a primary election. That's a lesson that a John Faso in the 19th District in New York or a Tom MacArthur in the 3rd District in New Jersey may be thinking to themselves right now.
But Andrew, is it like a binary choice in that, hey, before a primary, you take your political life in your own hands if you criticize this president? But then they got to think about a general election if they're in one of these swing districts that they need some Reagan Democrats or whatever to vote for them or whatever. Do they say one thing before primary day and then a different thing for the general?
It depends on the circumstances. It depends on how tough the challenge is on a primary. It depends on how tight the district is going to be in the general election. It's really, which do you fear more, criticizing Trump and putting yourself at risk in the primary, or the damage that supporting Trump will do for you in the general election? And it's really hard to know. I mean, that's the calculation. John Faso is maybe the best example of this whatsoever. He doesn't have a primary challenge, so he doesn't have to criticize Trump. But, he's got to be a little careful about embracing him too much.
Now, besides some of the big upsets and the major trends, we also took a look at the primaries to see if any of what we call bad candidates won nominations, candidates whose positions or baggage could help them or their parties in November. And we obviously talked about what we saw in Alabama, my God, with Roy Moore. Yeah. He's not the only one, though.
He's not, and we got one example yesterday in the primaries, and then video surfacing of another bad nominee, this one in New Jersey. But let's start with this man in Virginia. His name is Corey Stewart. He's now the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in Virginia. He'll take on Tim Kaine this fall. His primary is sort of a good news, bad news day for Stewart. The good news for him, anyway, he got a big attaboy from President Trump on Twitter today, including this final line: "Don't underestimate Corey, a major chance of winning." But Stewart has some baggage, like that he's either cozy with white supremacists or is just an out-and-out racist. We'll let you decide as you look at photos of Stewart posing with a Confederate flag at the bottom, or at the top right. That's in front of the Robert E. Lee statue in Charlottesburg. Remember that statue? That was ahead of that now infamous rally. Stewart has sided with the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville. And if you see on the left some of his campaign rhetoric, he's using the line "protect our statues" as a campaign theme, all of white nationalism to it, which might explain why even the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the people whose job it is to win Senate races for the GOP, has yet to endorse Stewart, even though he's their nominee, and they say they won't endorse him, which kind of hurts. Then there is the Republican nominee in New Jersey's 2nd House district. That's down south and includes Atlantic City, Cape May, Vineland, and the Jersey side of the Delaware Memorial Bridge. Meet Seth Grossman. Republican voters in the 2nd may not have met him well enough when they nominated him last week in a field of bad candidates. Here's what Grossman told a group of voters last November.
The best way to bring diversity to the Republican Party is for Republicans to openly say that the whole idea of diversity is a bunch of crap and un-American.
Diversity, a bunch of crap, and un-American. He also went on to add that it's an insult or an excuse by Democrats, communists, and socialists, basically, to say that we're not all created equal. That some people, if somebody is lesser qualified, and this is a direct quote, they will get a job anyway or get into college anyway because of the tribe that they're with, what group, what box they fit into. And when he was asked recently, he confirmed and defended those comments, Rich.
That's New Jersey.
That's South Jersey.
Okay, and the scariest part of this, I would think, if you're sitting at the RSCC or the RCCC, is, all right, we don't want to basically sully the brand and get behind these guys, but at any minute, the president might send a tweet saying, attaboy, go get them.
The two different trends that we just described with Sanford and then again with these bad, what we'll call bad candidates, they're linked. Because if you challenge Trump and the cult of personality that he's got around him, you may find yourself out. That means it's a smaller and smaller echo chamber that you're bouncing ideas around, and that leads to bad candidates because the more, you get into a primary and particularly a small group, the extreme voices are the ones that pull on the left and on the right for Republicans. Well, on the right, you got to outdo one another and wind up draping yourself in the Confederate flag or, bemoaning diversity as being a vice in this country in order to get ahead. And both of these guys are now the nominees, one for the Senate in Virginia, one for the House in South Jersey.
You saw other numbers, national polling. Any of them stand out to you, these numbers?
There's a few that I wanted to point up. The first is we talk a lot about the generic ballot. That's, no candidate name, but you got a Democrat and you've got a Republican. And right now, there you see the poll averages from Real Clear Politics, 7.5-point lead for Democrats. That's up from 3.2% on June 1st. So in the last 13 days, that lead has doubled for Democrats. We've seen a lot of swings in that. Enthusiasm is a big issue. This is from NBC and the Wall Street Journal. Democrats considerably more enthused and ready to go for this election than Republicans are. Republicans, that number will climb as we get closer to the election, but that's a big advantage. And finally is just where we are in the overall with the Senate and the House. Democrats have a good opportunity, but they have to win the majority of their races, particularly in the Senate. House looks a little bit better.
Not run the table, almost.
Almost run the table.
Andrew, thank you. Coming up next, everyone, the Supreme Court session, it's winding down, but cases with wide-ranging implications still on the docket, and they could impact everything from how you'll vote to privacy when it comes to even your own cell phone. We'll get into that next.